An investigative piece written by journalist Fishayo Shuyombo about the rot within Nigeria's criminal justice system may have ruffled a few powerful feathers in Nigeria. According to news reports, Shuyombo has gone underground to evade arrest for a purported charge of espionage against the state. The journalist had confirmed that he had to go undercover to spend 8 days in the company of prisoners and awaiting trial inmates in order to get first-hand information about administrative and legal details of the day-to-day operations of Nigerian prisons. Apparently, his final report and subsequent social media postings have not gone down well with the authorities. We'll be talking about this in a bit with Segun Awosanya, social justice activist and prominent advocate against the excesses of the Nigerian Police Special Anti-Robbery Squad. From there, we'll move on to speak with Liboros Oshoma, a lawyer and head attorney, Liboros Oshoma Chambers. And that will be on the issue, first, of the unstructured supplementary service data crisis, brewing between Nigerian banks on the one hand and telecom companies doing business in Nigeria on the other. We'll also be taking him off on another ongoing controversy, the controversy in Kogi State in north-central Nigeria, where the House of Assembly recently impeached the deputy governor with just a few weeks to a governorship election in the state.
As we move on, we shall be joined from our Abuja studio by Akin Showore, a lawyer, for a discussion on consideration for reduction of bail conditions for the convener of the #RevolutionNow movement, Omoyele Showore.
We'll also be catching up on news-making headlines across the globe and review the newspapers with the Rise News analyst Emmanuel Efeni. Ojiokpi will also be here to fill us in on what's trending around the world. It's going to be all of that and a whole lot more today on The Morning Show.
Welcome back to The Morning Show here on Arise News. It's now time to take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. MTN Nigeria on Tuesday confirmed that it has suspended its plans to implement charges around the unstructured supplementary service data, USS Decode, being used for bank transactions. The suspension came on the heels of a directive given by the Minister of Communications, Dr. Issa Pantami, calling on the Nigerian Communications Commission, NCC, the telecoms industry regulator, to ensure that the planned implementation of the USS Decode charges are suspended. Senior Manager External Relations at MTN Nigeria, Mr. Funsho Aina, confirmed to our sister correspondent this day that the implementation process was to commence on Monday, but that MTN did not commence the implementation based on the minister's directive. Now, as you said earlier, we're going to be discussing this with one of our guests, but it's good news that MTN has sort of been called to order in this fashion and has taken that directive.
Well, the MTN has no option in the matter. Because the MTN is answerable not just to its customers, but also to the regulator, the telecom industry regulator in this case, being the Nigerian Communications Commission. And the Minister of Communication, Dr. Issa Pantami, directed NCC to ask MTN not to go ahead. So MTN is duty-bound to comply. That's one. Two, also the central bank governor, Godwin Emefiele, had also directed the banks not to do business with MTN if MTN decides to go ahead. And he had advised them that they should, do business with telecom companies that are willing to maybe charge lower or not even charge at all for the use of, telecom for banking services. But what is interesting in this is that this has been a long conversation, particularly between the banks and the telecom companies, specifically MTN. You recall that the bank CEOs, they came out with a statement after the directive from the CBN governor to say that, look, they were disowning MTN, that, they never asked MTN or any telecom company to charge. But I find this curious because I think today, or was it yesterday, the cable published 2 letters. One letter indicating that, in fact, it was the body of bank CEOs that requested MTN and other telecom companies to charge. Because the MTN had approached, the telecom companies had approached the banks, which had been charging on banking financial transactions through telecom, they've been charging 50 naira. And then the telecom companies asked that, okay, if you are going to charge, if you are charging 50 naira, we want a share of that 50 naira. The response, according to an association of telecom operators in Nigeria, licensed telecom operators in Nigeria, Alton, they said, the response from the body of bank CEOs is that if they must share the 50 naira service charge, then of course they will have no option but to increase it by 450%. So the cable published that letter, and the response from the Association of Licensed Telecom Operators in Nigeria, there was so much talk about, end user billing and all of that. And what those two letters would seem to indicate is that the body of bank CEOs seem to be lying in terms of their role in the matter. And I think that bank CEOs, occupy such a position of trust and responsibility that they should not be seen to be lying in public. And we will need further clarification, from the body of bank CEOs. It will be scandalous for bank CEOs of Nigeria to be telling lies. That's one. Now, beyond all of this, of course, the issue now that MTN has complied is what will happen next. The Minister of Communications had said that the ministry and the regulator, they will take a look at what they have done. So the question is, is the Ministry of Communications and the regulator, are they going to approve of the charge, or they are going to ask MTN to reduce the charge, or they are going to take a decision that the banks and the telecom operators should share the 50 naira that is charged by the banks. So these three options are on the table. Because at the end of the day, the issue is about the use of technology, for financial services to promote financial inclusion. And at what cost?
Belongs to
the telecom.
Exactly.
Yes. At what cost? To what benefit? So there is still room for further discussions, and Nigerians will be interested. But that discussion also on the part of government is not enough to just issue directives. It is also important to look at the interest of the telecom companies. The telecom companies complain about investment in infrastructure, which is inadequate. They complain about the backbone, and the Galaxy backbone is owned by the Nigerian government. Is there something that can be done to make the backbone more efficient? The government also can use this opportunity to raise issues about the quality of service that is provided by the telecom companies. The Minister of Communications had asked for a reduction in the cost of data, which I think is in order. He's also asking for increase in terms of value. And many Nigerians will agree that the telecom companies, are not providing enough value, and there are consumer issues. So this may well provide an opportunity for government and the telecom companies, not just MTN alone, to do a comprehensive review of the telecom industry and how it operates in Nigeria.
Absolutely, and you're right, it would be really terrible if they were to verify that the body of bank CEOs were actually involved in this. I mean, Nigerians woke up on Monday morning shocked to see what they were getting in from MTN Nigeria, and it's good that the government has taken charge of that, because the problem here is the average Nigerian is paying far too much for absolutely everything. And this is a problem that was supposed to have had a resolution before, and clearly people are still trying to find ways to get more money in their pockets from the Nigerian person, and that cannot continue to happen. So hopefully the government do continue to take the bull by the horn, and we get to the bottom of the matter on whether the body of bank CEOs are actually involved in this, because that is quite important.
Well, I do give MTN credit for sort of complying, because they could have dug their heels in or started going on about how it's not us, it's them,
exactly,
and dragged it on endlessly. But it's also important to note that I'm glad the federal government responded in this fashion, because we see what has happened in Lebanon, and that was sparked by something similar. So it was timely. Now, 4 Nigerians have reportedly sustained injuries in fresh xenophobic attacks in South Africa. President of the Nigerian Union, South Africa, NUSA, Adetola Olubajo, confirmed the attacks, which took place at Witbank area of Mpumalanga province on Tuesday. According to him, no death was recorded, but there was loss of properties and people were injured. A week ago, Ikenna Otugo, a Nigerian entrepreneur, was killed at Emampengani in KwaZulu-Natal province of South Africa. Just in September, 490 Nigerians fled South Africa as a result of xenophobic attacks. There were also reprisals in Nigeria, leading to the closure of the South African High Commission. Earlier in the month, President Muhammadu Buhari visited President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa, and both countries renewed alliance and also sought measures of putting an end to attacks like the latest one. This is really awful news. Once again, at least nobody died, thankfully, but once again, property has been destroyed. A Nigerian's shop was burnt down. Nigerians having to rush to police stations looking for a safe harbor. It's really awful that this continues.
Well, it just means that the Nigerian High Commission in South Africa still has a lot of work to do to engage the South African authorities. We must also commend the Nigerian Union in South Africa, led by Dr. Olubajo. Dr. Olubajo has been very, has been hands-on in defending the interests of the members of his union. And I think that there should be a greater collaboration with the High Commission to ensure, that the South African authorities play their part. Now, a week ago when there was that issue in Mpangeni, in KwaZulu-Natal, and we reviewed it, we said here that the South African authorities should make sure that the perpetrators of these attacks are apprehended and that they are made to face the wrath of the law, because that is the only way the South African government can demonstrate good faith in the matter and show that it is serious about all the assurances that have been given, not just to the Nigerian president, but to other African countries, that indeed government, the South African government is not condoning criminal conduct or xenophobia. Now, since that incident happened, we have not heard of anybody being apprehended, and that's not good enough. Now, this latest attack in Ipalanga, occurred on a day, in fact, when the Minister of Home Affairs appeared before the South African Parliament and was addressing Parliament on issues of migration. Now, what led to this attack has not been disclosed, but, it's unfortunate, and the South African authorities, the onus is on them to make sure that every step is taken, and those steps being taken are seen to be, effective, to put an end to this criminal conduct on the part of their nationals.
I just don't understand what it's going to take for us to understand that this is not stopping on their behalf, and they are just going to keep on going. Ever since the president came back from South Africa, this is the second time we're reporting another attack on Nigerians or a Nigerian happening in the country, and it's going to continue because clearly they really and truly are xenophobic towards Nigerians, and we are not acting in the right way. I don't believe we're going about this in the right way. I genuinely believe that we need to place harsher measures towards South Africa to actually put our foot forward, because our nationals will continue to get killed, and we will continue to report these stories and nothing will be done. Lives are being gone. People's businesses are going nowhere. What is happening? It's so tragic.
It really is. I just feel like in life, as in everything else, what you allow is what will continue.
Exactly.
And we were very clear here that we felt, well, apart from Dr. Abati, that the president should not have visited South Africa when they're so hostile to Nigerians. But oh well. We'll take a short break and we'll be back with more news headlines. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Here are more news headlines. Comptroller General of the Nigerian Correctional Service, Jafaru Ahmed, said he has set up a panel to probe Ikoyi prisons, now known as Ikoyi Custodial Center, following an investigation by Fisayo Shoyombo, an undercover journalist. Shoyombo spent 8 days as an inmate in Ikoyi prison to track corruption in Nigeria's criminal justice system. He documented experiences on drug abuse, sodomy, bribery, pimping, and cash and carry operations, in quotes, at the facilities. But responding in a statement on Tuesday night, Ahmed said those found guilty of the allegations would be punished. Ahmed said the service has no intention of arresting or harassing the journalist over his findings, saying investigative journalists are partners who seek the development of the nation. He therefore called for more constructive engagement with the media and the general public with a view to strengthening the implementation of the Nigerian Correctional Service Act 2019. Well, this is good news to hear from him, but I'm not sure how that will be received by Fisayo Shoyombo, who at the moment is said to be in hiding and is, fearful for his life and liberty. It's really unfortunate that he's the one being hunted rather than the people that he has exposed. But I think we'll save a lot of this for our guest when we.
Well, the Comptroller General of the Nigerian Correctional Service, as they call it now, Jafaru Ahmed, has said that the prison service, well, we'll get used to calling it correctional service, would order an investigation, and that a panel has already been set up. But before now, there were reports that said certain elements within the same correctional service were accusing Fisher Shirombo of writing a tissue of lies. But the position of the Controller General, I think, supersedes that. Now, what was said is that by going to Ikoyi Custodial Center, formerly Ikoyi Prisons, as we knew it, with recording devices, that he violated Section 29 of the Nigerian Correctional Services Act, and therefore is guilty of espionage. Now, the people saying that are talking nonsense. The Constitution of Nigeria is the basic law. Under Section 22 of the 1999 Constitution, the media is empowered to hold every arm of government accountable, and that is why the media is regarded as the fourth estate of the realm. So there's no way investigative journalism can amount to an act of espionage, because what investigative journalism does is not just to hold people accountable, it's to promote the truth, is to establish the truth, and to put everyone on their toes, and to ensure in this particular case that our criminal justice system is reformed and strengthened. And if you look at what Fisher has written, two parts of it have been published. The third part has not been published. The first part deals with the criminality in police stations, using the example of the Pedro police station in Shomolu in Lagos, where he was taken in as an awaiting trial person on the grounds that someone had lodged a complaint that he bought a vehicle of about 2.8 million value and ended up paying just 300,000 naira, and that after that he refused to make further payments. And then, of course, he takes us straight into the police station, the poor condition, the criminal conduct of policemen, and all of that. And then in the second part, which is titled Cash and Carry Prison, he spent 5 days in the police station, then he later spent 8 days in the police station, in the prison, having been taken to a magistrate court. And from the magistrate court, he takes us into the prison. And again, it's the same case of, criminal conduct on the part of warders. In fact, from his account, it looks like it's the warders themselves that should be in prison, why the inmates should be released. So it will be interesting for all of this
what one of them said.
to be investigated. And it's not just the Controller General of the Correctional Service that should be doing an investigation. I would like the Inspector General of Police to also take his time out and study the first part of that investigative report. He will see that there may also be a need to take a look at what is happening. And then, of course, the report should also be of interest to the National Judicial Council, because it also talks about how there is abuse, within the judicial system. In other words, the rot in the criminal justice administration system. I think there are two reports that I have read so far, constitute very fine pieces of investigative journalism that could, in fact, form the basis, of material for teaching investigative journalism. But beyond all of this, I think that the matter is serious enough for the Federal Executive Council to take a look at it, and for President Buhari himself to take an interest. I think the investigation that has been talked about should not be limited either to the Correctional Service or to the police, because you recall that recently President Buhari has shown, great interest in reforming the prisons and also in strengthening the police. And if we have this kind of abuse, it means that he's not on the same page with the people who are in charge of these institutions. And it's serious enough for the Executive Council to look at the matter and for the President to order an independent inquiry into what transpired. And in the meantime, those officers, particularly in Ikoyi prison, who were mentioned directly and shown in video, when there is going to be that investigation, they should be asked to proceed on suspension until the investigation is carried out properly, an independent investigation, and sanctions applied. But in the long term, what the two reports that we have read show is that there is need for reform. There's still a lot of reform needed in the criminal justice administration system in Nigeria.
Undoubtedly, I completely agree with you. The need for reform cannot be overstated here. And, it's just good to know that we're also reaching a point in the media where we are really able to keep a lot of institutions on their toes. And I do hope that this does not end here. I do hope it's not another situation of we've set up a panel and things are going to go silent in one direction or another, really and truly, because this is a great piece of work, if I have to put it in the most positive way, simply because he has really exposed the deep, dark, honest truth, not just of the Correctional Center, but of several other police stations that we have across the country. And this is the start of something, so they cannot let it end here. Investigations have to be carried out. People have to be held accountable. But we will speak more about this, of course, when our guest joins us.
Absolutely. Now, at least 11 inmates have been rescued at a religious center in Zaria, Kaduna State, Nigeria. Security operatives raided the center, known as Malam Aliyu May Adakan Salatul Fatia, on Tuesday. Deputy Governor of the state, Hadiza Balarabe, later led some cabinet members to visit the rescued inmates. This comes 48 hours after 147 inmates were set free at the center located at Malam Nigas Rehabilitation Center in Kwana Gurguwa Igabi local government area of Kaduna. Meanwhile, Tony Ojukwu, Executive Secretary of the National Human Rights Commission, has directed state coordinators of the agency in the Northwest to investigate activities of illegal detention centers. Now, these detention centers being uncovered, you'd wonder how many are there exactly. They all need to be exposed immediately, and all of their inmates need to be set free. This particular one, did you see the little boy? How old was? There were two children, but one of them looked like he was about 10 years old. They were starving. They reminded me of pictures that we saw from 1945 when the Allies freed Auschwitz and the Jewish victims of the Holocaust were set free. It was extremely disturbing. Obviously have been starved, obviously so emaciated. What kind of horrible treatment, behaviors? I mean, I don't even have the words.
It's
well, it's totally condemnable. I mean, 3 centers now in Kaduna alone. Only God knows how many more have yet been uncovered. And then, of course, you know, the other day also there was a report from Katsina. And if you add up the figures, 347, 143, 11, 156, I mean, quite a large number of Nigerians. Some of them have been in these illegal detention centers for 8 years. But what we would like to hear is, you know, reports that the operators of those centers are already being prosecuted. Some of the parents who have been mentioned as having been the ones who have deposited their children in those centers, that they have also been apprehended and that they have been prosecuted.
Yes.
We are not hearing a lot in that regard. Otherwise, you know, we'll have this wave of, releases of illegally detained persons, and then at the end of the day, those people will go back to business as usual. And the search should not be restricted to the north. Perhaps it's a nationwide thing.
Yes,
perhaps it's a new kind of economy, you know, that we need to know a lot more about.
Absolutely, because I was just going to say that if in the past few weeks alone, the numbers we're receiving from these illegal detention centers are already in hundreds, if they are to do a proper search, what we're going to have is a situation where potentially we can find out that tens of thousands of Nigerians are in illegal detention centers across the country. And that is not something that anybody wants to know, but that is something that we have to find out.
And it's even more shocking that these rehabilitation centers, they are unregistered, they are unlicensed.
Anybody can just clamp people in chains.
I just hold them for years.
It's so frightening.
Yeah, it really scares me.
Yes. Now, the Financial Times has reported that Beijing is drawing up a plan to remove Hong Kong's beleaguered chief executive Carrie Lam after nearly 5 months of pro-democracy unrest. The pro-Beijing leader has faced sustained criticism from protesters in the semi-autonomous city. So far, the central government in Beijing has given its support to her and the Hong Kong police, calling the demonstrators rioters and condemning the violence. But according to the FT report, which quoted unnamed figures briefed on the deliberations, the Chinese government is drawing up a plan to replace her with an interim chief executive. However, sources told the newspaper that the plan will be dependent on the situation in the city first stabilizing so that Beijing is not seen as giving into violence. Now, this comes as the person who sparked this 5 months of protest has been released from prison for murdering his girlfriend. But I just think this story tells you everything about why people are protesting every single weekend. Why should Beijing cherry-pick the leaders?
Exactly.
Even look at how Carrie Lam herself was elected by just 1,200 people, a handful of pro-Beijing election committee. People in Hong Kong do not have universal suffrage in 2019.
Exactly.
They cannot go to the polls and elect their leader. It's ridiculous.
Well, this is not the first time that the chief executive will be replaced. It happened, well, not quite replaced, or that an interim person will be appointed as chief executive by Beijing. It happened in 2005 when the chief executive resigned. But the protesters are saying this is not enough.
Of course not.
And that the protests will continue because what they are asking for is democracy in Hong Kong and their right to elect their own leaders, not the chief executive or the legislators to be handpicked from Beijing.
Absolutely.
But there's already a short list. We have the 3 chance, and you have Tang. 4 of them now. We may replace them. But let's take a break.
Well, that's all on the news headlines.